Okay, so what we're going to look at today is some more 3D stuff and bring in 3D actual models into Photoshop. So there will be a website that I will post, but for the most part, TurboSquid is something that you can use. You have to make a membership, and you can get models that range from free to, well, let me just, yeah, so $300. So you can see right now, some people make a living by making models and charging lots of money for them for people that are using them for a variety of things, composition, special effects, commercials, that kind of stuff. I like this price right here, so we're going to stick with that. And then you can get some pretty decent models. And then there's one in here that I used. You can download your own. But the key is, and when you download it, you'll see, I think you'll see some specs of it, and you come over here and you'll see the download option. And then you'll, what you have to do, it's a little bit of a couple steps here. You just click on it and then hit download. It'll zip it for you and it'll begin to download. Okay, so I've already done that. So let me just get to this right here. Talk about the formats. So what you're looking for when it comes to using these things, you can use 3DS. So these are all prefixes that are associated with 3D programs. So OBJ is a universal 3D format that top 3D animation programs use, from Blender to Maya. You can render stuff and make OBJs. The other one that Photoshop seems to accept is our 3DSs. Okay, so if you don't see OBJ or 3DSs and you're trying to import your 3D model and it doesn't work, that's the reason why. It's not universal. Photoshop is still a 3D or a photo manipulation type of program. It's not total 3D, although they are bridging the gap. So the very first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in a background. So I just went and found a decent size sky image, obviously, because I want to make I'm bringing in an airplane. So we got to have the airplane flying around. So we're going to just stretch this out and position it wherever you want. Doesn't necessarily matter. Lock it in. Why do I keep losing that? And then let's bring in our 3D object. Okay, so I'm going to go 3D, new 3D layer from a file. So we've been doing extrusion with the blowing up the beetle. We've done the from a mesh, which is the pop can. Now we're going to go over here to where I downloaded the Boeing and 3D and we'll click on that. And bless you. Hopefully that'll import my plane. Perfect. So yellow screen, whenever you see the yellow line, that means that you're in the environment, so the environmental phase. So that's why you get the horizon line and all those type of things. So if I was going to try and put this on a runway or a tarmac or something like that, you're always going to play with this side of it, because this lines up the horizon line, it lines up your vanishing point, it gives you your perspective. Not so much a big deal here in the sky because no one really knows. I'm just going to try and zoom in here so we can get to see the airplane as best we can. So I'm using the camera there like so. So, if I'm going to download a model, we want to be able to see it. There are some things along with this, so I don't know if we need the landing gear out. There's shadows on the clouds. That's probably not a good thing, so we'll probably have to go into the airplane and fix that by switching them on and off. Okay, so I'm going to go into my 3D layer. And again, you can see that some models are really good as far as everything here that is in a category is something that was modeled and separated. And usually that means that if you took it into a 3D program, you can animate it. So if I wanted to animate the landing gear going up, obviously I can't necessarily do that in Photoshop, but it would mean that if I took this, downloaded this, and brought it into Blender or Cinema 4D, then I would be able to kind of toy around with that. But what we want to do right now is I just want to talk about a couple things. One is image-based lighting. So if we were to kind of render this out, and I don't know if we talked about the render option, but if I take this little rectangle and I kind of draw a square and I come over here and there's a little button saying render, it should say render. Yep. What that'll do is that'll give you, it'll composite the pixels and give you like a better quality image. Okay, so whenever you're doing a 3D image composite, you're going to want to render this out. You'll see at the very bottom, I don't know if you can, but it's giving me a little estimate as for how long it's going to take to do a really good job on rendering out all those pixels. Okay, whenever you click on it, it stops. And you can see a difference between, now we have two different sides where this is trying to render and this isn't. But what we can do here is we want to actually make the fuselage have a little bit of almost like a metallic reflection type of quality. Okay, so if I go back to my move tool and I select the image and I select it again, you can see, hopefully at some point, what I'm trying to do is select the fuselage, if I can get there. There we are. And so when I have that selected, you'll see that there's an option to change the reflection. Okay, so I'm selecting the material. I want to select the fuselage, the whole body of the plane. And I'm going to take the reflection and I'm going to jack that up. Okay, and in order to make this kind of feel like it's somewhat surrounded by the clouds, what do you think should be reflected on the fuselage? The clouds, right? Because if I'm surrounded by clouds, chances are the clouds should be reflecting on the image. So how can we do that? Well, this is what image-based lighting is. So you'll see right now, it's not turned on. You turn it on. And then what you should do is you should say, I want to make a new texture. And you'll be asked to say, well, how big should it be? Well, I already made my composite 1080 by 720, so it's going to give me a box. Right? And nothing happens. However, now what I have to do is the same thing before when we did for the pop cam. You have to edit the texture. So now I get this white stage, and then all I'm going to do is bring in my clouds. Okay, and we'll just extend it. Doesn't necessarily matter for that. So we have that going. And now when I go back to my image, and if I rendered this out now, so if I come over here and take a little section of the plane and render it off, we should start to see some of the clouds reflecting in the image. Unless the reflection is really, really high. So maybe we should probably take that down a bit. So it's going to be a little bit of kind of give and take when it comes to this stuff. But you get the idea of the power of it. So we're trying to add the reflection. Maybe it'll show up. Yeah. So you're getting a little bit. Actually, what's happening now is a reflection of this engine is showing up on the fuselage. So if I was to let that go, eventually it would render out. And anything that's in this composite will reflect on the fuselage. So that's kind of neat in one sense because now you can bring in some realism to bringing in a 3D composite. It's still pretty white, so we'll have to change that. But let's get rid of some of the other things in here. We don't really need shadows, so I could probably turn the shadows off and then select the plane itself, right? And we don't want to cast or catch shadows. So now those are starting to go. It looks like the little wing here is collecting some shadows, so we'll turn those off. And now, for the most part, all my shadows are gone. Okay, maybe there's something going on over there. We'll do another render and see how that's looking. Okay, so you can begin to see the clouds. A nice thing that you can do as well is as that's going, you can see a really nice reflection of that engine showing up over there. If I come over to this image-based lighting, what I should be able to do is, if I wanted to, I can change how the sky is kind of manipulated. And Photoshop's kind of slowing down a little bit. But what it's going to do is it's going to take your background image and rotate it around so that if you wanted more clouds or you weren't happy with the angle of the clouds, you can actually rotate this in the sense of a globe so that it would show what I'm doing right here. So you can see, I don't know if it's kind of, I should have turned the lights off, but you can see there's a little 3D globe in here. And what I can do is, if I really kind of wanted to move more clouds around, you're basically taking this 2D image, which is kind of wrapped around in a sphere, and rotating it around to get the effect that you want, which is kind of neat. The other thing that you can do is you can design the fuselage and add more things to it yourself. So what does that mean? So if I stop this animation and we deselect, let's go into the fuselage. So I'm going to grab my move tool and select it until I see fuselage. And then we're going to grab the texture. And exactly the same way that we did the pop can, I'm going to go say I want to edit the texture. Okay, and what it did is these are UVs. So it unmapped the decals that are already on the model. And now I can do something to them and add them, manipulate to them. So if I wanted to add a layer, and let's make this blue font, and we're going to make my own airline. So I'm going to come over here, and we're going to say Wadden's airline, boom, bring that down over here. Automatically what's going to end up happening is, okay, now I have my own, so I can kind of change what's going on, right, with the initial UVs. So if I wanted to put an image let's see, what else could I do? Yeah. Let me just get rid of some things here. Yeah. So if I wanted to dress up the tail, I don't know if I still have that image. I probably don't. You could add, you know, sometimes you see, what is it? Especially trips to the Bahamas, they would put like a palm tree on the back of the plane. You would be able to go and say, well, I'm going to go into where that texture is, and I'm going to add something. So I could take, let's put me on the back of the plane there. So there we go. Yeah. Away and beyond. Bring this over here. Right? Select it. You guys should all know how to do this. Select. Even the coffee cup. Yeah, we're selling that. We're going to feather it. Modify. Feather. We'll feather it a ton. And then we'll deselect the stuff that we don't need. So I'll get rid of the lock. And then I'll say select inverse. And then delete. And then we have this little mosaic. We'll bring that over towards my texture by grabbing this and then dragging it up to here. Okay, and let me put that on the tail. So we'll flip it and maybe shrink it down a bit. Okay, and then I go back to my actual image. Oop. And if I deselect this and grab this, we should see a render, right, of the tail. So, and then now that's because that's 3D. Even if I move the model around now, right, like that, you could get a position the plane wherever you want, and then away you go. So, two things I'm going to get you to do here, just because we're getting into some more intricacies. And you could say, well, I really don't want the landing gear. How much control do I have over that? Well, I should be able to select those things and maybe turn them off. So if I take the little eyedropper or eye thing and turn off the wheel, I don't see it. There's another little thing in there. I think there's a box, gearbox. We'll turn that off. So now I don't have the wheels out anymore. So you do have some control over models that you didn't necessarily make, that you can turn things on and off. But what I'm looking for are that you import an image. You have to have a background that would be reflective on a surface. So whatever image you have, this isn't going to work unless, because we're looking at how you would turn on image-based lighting and that you understand how to add image-based lighting. So you have to load the same background that you have so that it is kind of cast onto the metallic surfaces. You have to be able to select the surfaces of whatever it is that you're making. So if this is a fuselage, just by highlighting it, you can get into a whole bunch of things, maybe decrease the shine, decrease the reflection, and go from there, and then render it out. So the other thing I'm looking for is that you can actually select the plane or whatever the surface is and render it out. And then you'll see, you know, a little bit of the clouds reflecting here. And by no means does it have to go to the deadline, because sometimes Photoshop will actually, you know, render for like 30 minutes, especially when you're doing a high-end image that would be for a client that you're putting up on a billboard or something like that. You want the best image quality you can, and what it's doing is each square is kind of rendering out each pixel so that it looks really crisp and clear. All right, and you can kind of play around with that. So if you downloaded a tank, a car, an airplane, a spaceship, whatever, you know, a UFO, make sure that the clouds or whatever the environment is reflective in the surface. And if you really want to get into specifics, then see if you can unwrap the UV and kind of customize it to make your own thing. So you can, again, use the analogy of kind of make your own airline, you know, have names on it that way, or design a really nice pattern. You know, you could put some gradients on this and soup it up type of thing, just to show you that you can kind of grab 3D images and customize them that way. So that's all we're doing. That shouldn't really take too long, because there's still about 5-6 people still finishing up their multimedia composites. So I will give you two things. I will give you a zip folder with the Boeing 747 if you want it. If you don't want it, I'm going to give you the link to TurboSquid so you can go download your own models. You do have to make your own account. It's probably a good thing anyway. I think it's linked to an Adobe kind of Adobe ID account or maybe a Google account, so it might not be that tough. And I'll just put down the 3 things that you have to be able to show me that you did in the composite. Image-based lighting, rendering it out, and customizing the texture. Does that make sense? Any questions? Clear? Perfect.